welcome to Commander Central, episode 101. And we're here doing a deck tech for Patron supporter Tom Menard on his Marchesa the Black Rose Reanimator list. I'm Dana.
And I'm Max.
No Chris tonight. He is buying a house. He actually found one he liked, so I think that's a good enough reason to miss a show.
Maybe.
We'll let it slide this time, I suppose.
It's his first house.
Presumably there won't be many more house purchases that are hindering him here along the way.
Or any of us, to be quite honest. I mean, you had yours back in November, and Chris has his now.
That just leaves you.
I'm fine staying here in the Dungeon of Love.
So how was War of the Spark pre-release? We should quick touch on that, because we both played Saturday night at a 6 o'clock. Do you want to go in?
2 and 2.
2 and 2?
Yeah.
How was your sealed pool?
Terrible.
You played Dimir, didn't you? Is that what it was?
I played Grixis.
Oh, that's right. You went 3 colors.
Yep.
So how was fixing? Because you didn't, I don't think had very much. So you just had to wing it and hopefully I draw.
I played 15 lands, 5 of each.
Oh, and that's a relatively low land count too.
Yeah, most of my spells were 2 or 3 mana, and my big bombs were Jace and Ralzeric and Obnixilis. So.
And actually, I probably should have tweaked mine as the night went on, because I wound up pulling out a couple of my big beater creatures, because I found that's just not what the deck wanted to be doing with its time. Mm-hmm. So I could have dropped. I started at 17 land. I probably could have gone to 16 and put another spell of some sort, something small in, but I didn't really think to do that until literally right now. So I played Azorius Control. My promo was Teferi, and then I opened a Teferi, I think, in the first pack. So I'm like, well, I guess I'm playing Azorius. That's telling me what to do.
Yep.
It was a lot of fun. I thought as a sealed event, I really enjoyed it.
Does this change your mind and you'll be playing in the main event at Madison?
I will not. I don't. Number one, I'm not good enough to do that kind of thing. It would be fun to do, but going in knowing I'm going to be playing against people that are actually smart and have paid attention and studied and have a plan, I'm just going to get rolled anyway. I would rather just goof around, play some Commander stuff, and that's it.
Yeah, I think after you left, the Team D20 at the store, most of the members were there for the 6 o'clock pre-release, and they were trying to figure out what nights work best for the next 2 weeks so they can all come in and just practice sealed 3 or 4 nights a week.
Now, I do think I'm probably going to try to do the occasional F&M draft, I think, because I think it would be fun to draft now and then. And I'm not usually someone who does that very often, but I think I might try doing a few of those while that's the format being played before, I guess it would be the core set that would replace it. So I've got a few months. Yeah,
very true. I mean, in there somewhere will be a couple Modern Horizon drafts, I'm sure.
Yeah, that's true. I saw a quote on Twitter today from Mark Rosewater about Modern Horizons that said basically that in testing they were calling it Time Spiral 2.
Oh, fun.
Because there's so many different mechanics. It's said it's a really high difficulty level in terms of how techy the set is. And I would guess, again, probably the Time Spiral comparison is Spiral had so many just random one-off mechanics. Yeah. There wasn't the usual 6. There was 30 mechanics in there. Because this one card has this one thing that we've never seen before and we'll never see again. And I would guess, I don't think we're going to see a lot of brand new mechanics, but it's entirely possible we'll see, hey, here's a brand new cycling card, and here's one brand new card with Dredge, and here's a brand new card with,
Delve, and every keyword that's good in Modern, essentially.
Right, exactly. So that's really, really interesting. I guess that makes complete sense now that he said that, but I was really looking forward to Horizons, and that's making me even more interested in it.
Yeah.
So if you would like to get a deck tech done by us, just like Thomas getting done here tonight, how would you do that, Max?
Head over to patreon.com/CMDR Central. Check out our reward tiers. There's that mini deck tech at the $10 a month level, and then the full deck techs are the levels above that.
Yes, indeed. And we would definitely appreciate your support. And we like doing these deck techs. They're actually a lot of fun to do. We started following. The reason we're doing them on Sunday nights for the Thursday show now is we just had enough to do that we can't do them on the regular show. So now that's where we're going twice a week.
Yep.
You can also find us online on social media, on Twitter at CMDR Central, on Facebook at CMDR Central, just online in general at cmdrcentral.com, and on YouTube at CMDR Central. We're pretty easy to find everywhere.
That was a very good imitation of Chris, seeing that he's not here tonight.
Filling in for him.
Yeah.
Contests. We have one that we just set up. I guess by the time this airs, it'll be 4 days ago.
Set up or wrapping up?
No, well, I guess we have both. We have ones that are wrapping up, and we have the deck, the live brew deck that we just finished. That will be for the month of May, I guess.
Oh, yeah, that makes sense because it will be May when this episode airs. Look at that. Yeah, so we will actually be announcing the winners of our bundles on a Thursday show this month. We'll be announcing those on the show that airs on Thursday the 9th.
Okay.
Instead of Monday the 6th. And for the month of May, we're doing a single giveaway on our Patreon channel. If you head over there and support us by the end of May, or just continue to support us there, you'll be entered to win that Rolesque Apex Hybrid Infect deck we built back on episode 100. We're giving that away in one of those really nice custom wood deck boxes as well.
Yeah, listener David S. hooked us up with a really, really sweet Aaron Kane wooden deck box. Those are the ones you've seen all over Twitter in the last couple of years. He's makes just fantastic looking custom wooden boxes. And we are giving one of those away courtesy of Patreon supporter and listener David S.
Awesome. So thank you, David.
Thank you very much. And thank you for all our supporters once again. That's a really big deal. We appreciate it. Get Max Pants, #.
Yes.
So let's jump right into talking about his deck.
Let's do it.
This is a Marchesa, the Black Rose Reanimator list. We'll put the link out there in the show notes so you can take a look at his deck and see what you think with the version before we talked about it. He wrote us, Max had a few questions he always asks, and you want to read his response back to us about what he wants to do with the deck, Max?
Yeah, so he's looking to for tips to smooth out the mana base and help with the Reanimator package, work a little better. It seems to not do anything for the first 4 or 5 turns, and his game kind of shuts down after a few board wipes. Sometimes the deck just pops off, but other times it just gets held down because of its Marchesa. It just has a high target on its back.
And then he says, I think maybe a way to either go wide or diversify threats or more ways to accelerate or dig, so he's doing something in his first 4 turns. Said his meta has some sort of menacing creature out early and often, but there's no real consistency, so he needs normal reanimation targets that work better and aren't as reliant on Marchesa.
Yeah. He thinks he has too much tutoring in the deck and not enough things to find, which is kind of unique. I don't think I've ever heard that said before.
I haven't, but I don't. I think that kind of makes sense. Like there's. It's not that there aren't things to find, but there aren't maybe silver bullets to go find.
Right. He also says the deck has a lot of different engines, and most of them are very mana intensive, but they can easily change the game if they get set up.
Yes. So this is interesting. So when we first looked at this deck, Max's response and mine were very similar. We're like, man, this already feels pretty tuned.
Yes.
But he wrote his response back, and I got looking at it, and it's a deck with a lot of good cards in it, and it seems tuned in that regard. But I can see where the cogs don't mesh together. So like all his complaints and the problems he pointed out kind of makes sense after I looked at it closer.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. You know, we actually asked him a couple extra questions because he did say his meta is pretty competitive. So he's trying to make this deck balance between the competitive side of the meta, yet still be able to play with some lower level power decks, or even blend the 2 play groups together if possible.
And that makes complete sense.
Yes.
One thing that kind of works in our favor when it comes to evaluating this deck is we have at least, I think, 2, if not 3 Marchesa decks in our meta that we see very, very frequently. One that went live basically once Conspiracy 1 came out. The guy put the deck together. So we've played against Marchesa quite a bit.
Yeah.
And I it makes me feel pretty comfortable in talking about this deck.
Yeah, I definitely agree. You know, when I first looked at the deck, I went to extremely competitive and let's try to tone it down is what I kind of went with it.
So there's a couple different things we can talk about, ways to like change it wholesale or make small tweaks, whatever. And we'll probably talk about all of those so he can choose from which way he wants to take it and what he wants to do. Mm-hmm. So the first thing he said, he's looking for a way to smooth out mana, and it seems like there's nothing to do for 4 turns. And I'll just throw the first thing that immediately jumped out at me there, the first thing I would probably tweak is a couple of the mana rocks. Because there's a decent amount of ramp. I think the amount of ramp he has there in this deck is probably roughly what I would be running. I don't think you need more than that. There's a Soul Ring. There's 3 Signets. There's 2 Talismans. So right there, that's the 6 1 or 2 drop ramp sources. There's a Wayfarer's Bauble that costs 1 to cast but 2 to crack, and that gets you a land. So that's effectively ramp spell as well, and it's cheap. Asha's Altar, yeah, it makes mana, but it's mostly there as a sack outlet, so we won't really count that necessarily. It's the last 2 mana rocks that I think are ones I would tweak, and that's Thran Dynamo and Gilded Lotus. Thran Dynamo costs 4, and you can tap it for 3 colorless. Gilded Lotus taps for 5, and you can tap it for 3 of any 1 color.
Yes.
So I think number 1, Gilded Lotus doesn't fix your mana. It has to be the same color, so it doesn't give you any fixing. Thran Dynamo obviously doesn't fix because it just makes colorless. But I think those are 2 rocks that if in your opening hand, that probably leads to that problem where you feel like you're not doing anything on your first couple turns.
Yeah.
So there's plenty of colorless costs. I don't think either of those are bad choices. But myself, personally, particularly because this deck is reanimating things, you don't necessarily need to have the ability to make 10 mana to cast Jin-Gitaxias or 10 to cast Ulamog. I think you would rather take efficient, quick turns and use your reanimator spells versus trying to make a just big bomb amount of mana.
Right.
So I would replace both of those 2 to start with. I think if you don't care about budget and you're just looking to go hard, I think the obvious changes there would be Mana Crypt and Grim Monolith. You could swap in a 0 rock stone, but like Grim Monolith is so nice because you can untap it whenever.
Yeah.
Unlike Mana Vault, which has to be at upkeep. So if you just wanted like power mana rocks to replace those 2, that would be where I would go. If you're not so worried about that, or you don't want to go spend, $400 on mana rocks, which I would bet most people don't, I think Everflowing Chalice and Felwar Stone work just fine there. Everflowing Chalice doesn't fix your mana, so that's the same as Thran Dynamo, but you can cast it on turn 2, and if you happen to draw it on turn 4 or 6 and have nothing going on, you cast it for a Thran Dynamo amount of mana that you can make. It's more expensive, but I think the flexibility is worth it.
Yeah.
And I think in a 3-color deck, Felwar Stone as a 2-drop rock is going to really frequently just be effectively a signet. It's going to make you 2 of your 3 colors, if not all 3. I think it's worth, again, you're going to be able to consistently cast that on turn 2 in your opening hand. I think that's better than waiting until turn 4. I don't think this deck wants to move that slowly.
No, I agree with that. I agree with your high-end options. For the budget options, I actually was thinking like Mind Stone. It helps with that late-game draw.
That's true. It's nice. You can recover from it. If it's late game and you've had a board wipe come through and you need, I just need a card in hand. Mind Stone works great there too. If that was your choice over Everflowing Chalice, I would be on board with that completely.
Yep, and then the other one would be Hedron Archive, just because it still produces colorless, but can draw 2 cards later in the game as well. Yeah, that would make sense as well. I think having the flexibility on those, I think you want to have either some flexibility or speed. I just don't think this is a deck where just bulk mana is what you want. Correct.
The land base looks great. I mean, you're running all 3 duels, like the original Alpha Beta Unlimited duels. There's, the Suite of Shocks, and
there's the fetches in here as well.
Right, fetch ones that get things. There's the suite of lands that make any color, like City of Brass, Exotic Orchard. So, it's as good as you're going to make them. Literally, it's as good of a land base as you're going to make in terms of producing colored mana, just period.
Yeah.
I think Cabal Coffers is one I'm not sure of in a 3-color deck. What are your thoughts there, Max?
So looking at all the mana pips here on the MTG Goldfish list, there's a lot of black pips in this deck. But, I mean, if you're not counting the duels, he's only running 4 basic swamps. There's an Urborg in here. That's a lot of moving pieces to get Cabal Coffers online.
Yes.
If that's in your opening hand, that's an instant mulligan.
It's a dead card unless you have Urborg out, it's a dead card early. And there's going to be a lot of times if you don't have Urborg, even on turn 6 or turn 7, it's not making you positive mana.
Right.
So it's still a dead card. Now, if there's times when you're going to get Urborg out and, hey, I now have 9 mana off this coffers, and that's fantastic, but I feel like it's going to screw you more times than it's not.
Yeah. I definitely agree with that. Especially, like, there's not even, like, a chromatic lantern in this deck, so it can't even tap for a mana if that was out. I think I agree. It's going to be a dead card a lot of the time, and if you want this deck to be able to compete on the more competitive end of the shop, you don't want to see that in your deck, I think.
And yes, and probably if you're playing competitive people, they're not going to let you keep a Cabal Coffers out.
You know, you say that, but it's funny, there's no land destruction lands in the mana base.
That's true, not in his. So maybe everyone in the shop isn't running them either. That could be.
Yeah.
I mean, I would find a room here for 1 or 2 land destruction lands.
And some basics.
Well, yeah. I mean, the basics thing is, I get it. If you don't see Blood Moon,
right,
you can get away with it. So, like, that's one of those things. And so if no one punishes you, then there's no need to really go too hard in the basics. So I get that. Maybe that's what the meta is, and that's fine. The one other one I was kind of thinking was, if you are going to run Cabal Coffers, I'd be really tempted to run Teleria West just to have one more way to go get Cabal Coffers or Urborg if you have, one or the other.
Yeah.
There's not a lot of downside to it. Worst case, it just comes into play tapped, and that's not ideal, but I think the opportunity cost is pretty low there to have one more way to get half of that piece if you're going to run it. So I would probably take Coffers out, but if I kept it in, I would add Teleria West.
Yeah. Although that's not a cheap card anymore either.
It isn't, right. That was not long ago. It was like, yeah, run it. It's $6. I think it's over 20 now.
It is over 20.
So, yeah, that's an easy recommendation to make, but it's a little bit harder to slot into a deck for sure.
Yeah.
But yeah, again, Strip Mine and Wasteland are the ideal land removal lands, but you can get 95% of the way there with Tech Edge and Ghost Quarter.
For sure.
So, and the difference is, again, on occasion, you're going to have that opening hand where you're like, I'm going to keep this Badlands and this Swamp and this Strip Mine, and then you're not going to draw a colored land for 3 turns and you're going to feel bad. But there's also going to be so many times when, like, that Strip Mine's in play and someone else drops their Cabal Coffers or drops a Valkut or drops or flips over a Growing Rights or something. And I just think the land destruction lands save you way more often than they hurt you.
Mm-hmm. I would 100% agree with that because, I mean, we don't know if there's any of those nice Ixalan flip lands in the meta.
Right, yeah.
Just dealing with a problem land is good to do.
Absolutely. So he said he has a little bit of trouble bouncing back from board wipes, which is, in a Reanimator deck, I think not what you want to hear.
No, not at all.
Because you should be able to shrug that off. But I also get it, I think, because I think a lot of the recursion and stuff here is recursion that's kind of one-off stuff. Yep. Like Animate Dead. So you use it, if you've reanimated a few things and a board wipe happens, you're out that card in hand, and there's a lot of things you have to do to get back into place to start having stuff get reanimated again.
Yeah, for sure. Because
most Reanimator decks, when you talk Reanimator, it's people that are playing things like Chainer, where it's like baked into the commander.
Yep. Or even running spells like Living Death or
right.
Living End, stuff, mass reanimation spells. Where this deck really isn't. It's the one-off, get something in your graveyard, get it out quick, and then you keep it around.
So the first small thing I would recommend here is to take a look at the draw. I think there's a lot of draw in this deck, but I think part of the problem is it's maybe not as diverse of a draw suite as it could be. You have a couple of the draw effects that are repeatable, particularly the enchantment ones. You're talking Phyrexian Arena, Rhystic Study, Mystic Remora. Those are all 3 fantastic cards, and I would probably run them in this deck if I was playing them. Like, I would just keep them. They're excellent. Mm-hmm. But most of the other draw spells are things that tend to do kind of looting type effects. So you have stuff like Faithless Looting, which again is a great card, but when that's all you're running, I think that's a little bit of the problem. Things like we have what else? Forbidden Alchemy, Frantic Search. So there's a lot of cards. A lot of your draw cards here are things that don't necessarily get you cards ahead.
Yeah,
and even Chart of Course. Like I get the logic there because you're doing a Reanimator deck, so it's giving you a chance to put things in the graveyard to cheat the cost to reanimate them. Chart of Course is the same way if you don't attack with stuff. But I think if you have too many of those effects, you put yourself in a position where it's tough to actually get cards ahead. And I think that might be a little bit of the problem there. I think he's not getting ahead resources. I think he's maybe leaning a little bit too hard into the effects that just let him pick what he wants to put in the graveyard.
Yep. I 100% agree with that.
Faithless Looting is tough to pull because it's Faithless Looting. There's a reason it's one of the best cards in Modern. And I am a fan of Chart of Course for the same reason. It's really flexible. It can just draw you 2 cards, or it can let you put something in the graveyard. Obviously, there's some really great things in here too. Intuition is a disgustingly good card. And I like Frantic Search, and I like things like Forbidden Alchemy, but those are the 2 I would probably look at taking out and just replacing with just raw draw spells.
Yep, I agree with the raw draw spells, or even putting in like Factor Friction.
Yeah.
Because you're still going to get stuff into the graveyard, but you're going to keep what you need for that instant.
Or even like Notion Rain, where it's doing both. It's giving you raw cards to hand, and it's putting stuff in your graveyard. Like, if there's a deck for Notion Rain, I think any blue deck is a deck for Notion Rain. I love that spell. But like, this is absolutely a perfect deck for Notion Rain.
Yep. And we're also missing the big thing is that Notion Rain is a loss of life, which you need to make sure Dethrone constantly gets triggered. For sure.
Because that can be a problem. Like, that's one of the things we've seen in the Marchesa deck. If you find yourself in a position where you are the one on the throne, it can make it really tricky to make things happen. So I would definitely look at Notion right now. I would swap out a few of those kind of looting draw spells for ones that just get you cards ahead.
Yep. Something like Painful Truce would be great in this deck.
For sure.
Draw 3, lose 3.
Yep. Notion Rain, like we said. Even Read the Bones. Because not only are you getting 2 cards and you're getting cards ahead, but it's letting you filter and decide which are the best cards of those cards you want. So things like that, I think you do want some things to let you put cards in the yard, but I think you just he needs a little more of the spells where like, I know I can cast this right now and put two or 3 cards in my hand, and that's it.
Yep.
Versus like, as much of a bomb as Mystic Study is, that's really easy to cast and have the person say, before the end of your turn, I'm going to spend 3 and naturalize it.
Exactly.
And then you're out. And if that happens for your Phyrexian Arena next turn, and for the Mystic Grimoire the turn after that, you've accomplished nothing other than, I guess, soak up their removal. But I think you want cards versus them losing removal.
Yes.
So let's talk here a little bit about diversifying his threats. What are your thoughts on that, Max?
Oh, I have a lot of thoughts on this. I think all of his threats right now are very combo based.
They're combo based, or they're not necessarily that threatening even?
Yeah. So the non-threatening maybe threats that are in this deck are Jin-Gitaxias Core Augur. I mean, it is threatening to a new player. I get to draw 7 cards and you don't have a hand essentially. But that's not really going to get the job done for 10 mana swinging in with 5 power.
And Jin-Gitaxias is great, and there's probably absolutely those games where you can turn 1 Entomb Jin-Gitaxias and turn 2 Animate Dead It and just win the game.
Right.
And there's probably, it's a good value card to reanimate on turn 6. Like, there's probably no point in the game where it's not useful, but I think, and I wouldn't say take it out, but I think this deck needs more cards that just kill people.
For sure. Or more fun stuff.
Maybe, sure, yeah. Because talking about wanting to play with newer players or with more casual groups, they aren't going to want to lose to an Entombed Jin-Gitaxias. That's going to ruin the night of some dude playing with a Precons deck. Like, he's just going to be upset. No one's going to like that.
Right.
So I'm not saying don't. And that's easy enough if you're Tom to just be like, oh, I have an Entomb in my hand and this Animate Dead, I'm just going to not do it. Yeah, so I guess you can go around that, but
you can pull some punches, but I mean,
for sure,
it's hard when you start mixing the casual and the competitive people. What do you do?
Right. The one thing that jumps out at me here is I think there's a lot of stuff here that kind of generates pretty solid value, but there's not enough stuff that
push it over the edge.
Exactly. That changes the face of the game to the point where you're like, if you don't deal with me in a turn, I'm going to win.
Yes, I will agree with that.
And I don't know if you want to lean too hard into the steal someone's creature's sack outlet kind of game. But that wins games in Marchesa, and it scales really well because you are not going to kill the dude who's running 6/1/1 elves with steal your stuff, sack it, take it under your control. But you are going to win a game against the person who's running a Wormcoil engine and a, his own engine.
Right, the mono green stompy deck, or just the general good stuff deck.
Yeah, those kind of things really do scale really well, and they get around the fact that you don't have to entirely rely on your deck producing the threats. Mm-hmm. And we'll use one of our friends' decks who plays Marchesa. He doesn't steal that much stuff, but he is running Mob Rule, and he's running Insurrection. And number one, those are both cards that when cast at the right point in the game, it doesn't matter what your commander is or what your plan is, you can just win games. Or at least like shake things up so badly that it alters the face of what's happening. But there's also those times where if you've got Ashnod's Altar out and you Insurrection and then sack all your stuff, all the stuff that you took to generate, first of all, a ton of mana, and second of all, to have them come back into play because of Marchesa, because you put a +1 counter on when you attacked, then again, you've set up this board state where like people have to respond or they're just going to lose next turn.
Yeah, I mean, we like you said, Dana, we see those cards out of the main Marchesa deck we play against, and they are backbreaking when cast correctly. I think the downside is it doesn't help the I sit there for 4 turns and do nothing part of the game. But I think it's just the mindset you have to have with this deck is this isn't a deck that if you don't want to come out quick on turns 1 through 4, you don't have to.
Right. But like I've had that Mob Rule cast before though, when there's been one creature in play. Like I think I had it cast against me the last time we played. He Mob Ruled for creatures, I can't remember if it's power or CMC. You pick greater than 4 or less than 4, whatever it is.
I think it's power.
I think it's power. Well, you can look that up briefly while I finish the...
Mob Rule, 4 red for sorcery. Choose 1, gain control of all creatures with power 4 or greater. Until end of turn, untap, they gain haste. Or gain control of all creatures with power 3 or less. Okay.
Well, he cast it against me the turn after, like, somebody board wiped and passed a turn, and then I played a Consecrated Sphinx and passed a turn, and he Mob Ruled just to take the Sphinx.
Yep.
And that's a great, like, that's worth your 6 mana. Because not only did he take it for the turn, then he played Marchesa and attacked and put the counter on it and sacked it to Ashnod's Altar or whatever he had out for a sack outlet, and it came back into play under his control. That kind of stuff scales really, really well. There's almost always going to be something worth stealing. And in the right situation, whether it's Marchesa and you keeping the stuff or it's just attacking and killing somebody, that is going to win games.
Yep, for sure.
And I look at something like Keterek Leviathan as a creature in this deck, and I get why he's running it, because if you can sack that and have it come back into play, you can keep looping everybody having to bounce their entire board state. But so do you.
Exactly. It hits you too. That's why I'm really confused by this card.
Well, I know. I mean, like, it's a good card for terms of like controlling the entire game, I guess. For sure, you can soft lock everybody. But if your Leviathan's the only way you're winning, and you're having to, sack it to re-loop that constantly, it's going to take you 14 turns to win the game.
Right. Especially because, just the initial play, it costs 8 mana to play the Keterek Leviathan. It's going to bounce Marchesa.
Right, yes.
So you need another 4 mana on top of that 8 just to get Marchesa out so you can hopefully next turn swing with the Leviathan to get that +1/+1 counter on it.
And even if you reanimate it, so say it's got pitched to Faithless Looting and you reanimate it and bring it into play, then you still need to cast your Marchesa if you want to get the counter on it to loop it, or at least have something else out that can put a counter, like Unspeakable Symbol, whatever. Right. And then again, if you're sacking it and Marchesa's getting bounced, it's a decent enough card, but I think for 8 mana, you're not hard casting it very often, but it's still in your deck at 8 mana. Occasionally you're going to have to. I'd rather just run Insurrection and just like have something that 80% of the time you probably kill somebody with, if not more.
Right. You're going to win the game with Insurrection.
You'll win the game, or at the very least probably kill one person.
Right.
And that's even before you factor in using tricks to keep everything you took with it.
Yeah.
So I would look into. I wouldn't go super hard into that. I don't think you need to run all those single target red steel creature effects.
Right.
But I think those two do a lot of work, and I think there's an old artifact called Helm of Possession.
Yes.
And it's 4 mana to cast, and you can spend 2 mana and tap it to sacrifice a creature and gain control of target creature. In this deck, number one, you are probably going to be sacrificing a creature that has a +1 counter on it. So it's going to then come back into play off Marchesa's ability anyway. And then you can grab a hold of somebody else's creature with it, presumably the best thing in play, and then hopefully put a counter on that, and then sacrifice and have it come back into play under your control, and be able to untap the helm and take something else.
Yep. A card specifically that our buddy runs is Zealous Conscripts.
Yeah, which is disgusting if you can blink it. You don't need to blink it. If you do it one time, it's almost always great.
Right.
But if you can blink it and sack it,
yeah, you're just going to be, you can grab something, swing with both of them, they get the counter, you sack them, they come back, they're yours permanently, and you do it all over again.
Yeah. I think any combination of those 4 things in particular, I would run over Cardiac Leviathan.
Yep. Another one that helps with that go wide strategy is Herald of the Secret Streams. This was from Ixalan. And all it is creatures with +1/+1 counters on them that you control are unblockable.
Yeah, right.
So that helps you get damage through no matter what.
You can just poke through consistently every time.
Yes.
And maybe in your meta, you don't need to worry about that. And that isn't a big deal. And if that's the case, then that's fine. And hey, they can't block your stuff if you just Insurrection and took it all.
Right.
But I think that's a kind of useful card that can close out games in a way that maybe something like, Triskelion's a great card if you're playing Marchesa. And if you have them both out, you win the game.
Right.
And if you don't, I hate having that card.
Yeah.
And if that's the way you want to play, that's fine. But I feel like I don't like cards that are only good in this one really narrow application.
Yeah. This is he's running Mike and Trike. My notes specifically said run one half or the other. Just because personally to me it's boring.
Yeah, and it's not good if you don't have both halves.
Right. But I think this is where the competitive side of the deck comes in because he is running an enormous amount of tutors in this deck.
So let's look at the tutors here a little bit.
I have one more creature.
What is that?
Gonti.
Oh, yeah.
Because that just sounds fun.
Well, and again, it kind of plays in that you can take the creature and put it into play and blink it or not blink it, I keep saying blink it, I mean kill it, sack it, have it go to the graveyard and come back under your control. But you do the same with Gonti and repeatedly use that ability. Yeah, that feels like it's going to generate value more consistently, I think, than some of these things.
Yep, especially because Gonti has Death Touch. So either someone isn't going to block and they're going to get hit for 4 or 5 damage, or they are going to block and Gonti just comes back because he still has that +1/+1 counter on him.
Right.
And then you Gonti someone else and you just build this massive cards that you have for the rest of the game.
Yep. So let's talk the tutor question we had here. There's Gamble, there's Mystical Tutor, there is Vampiric Tutor, there's Demonic, there's Diabolic Intent. Technically, Intuition is a tutor as well. Things like Buried Alive and Entomb both tutor things to your graveyard. I think those are, is that the main ones? Did I miss anything there?
There's a Rune-Scarred Demon as well.
Oh, yep. As a creature, there's Rune-Scarred Demon.
But yes, that is all of them. And that's 10.
That's 10, but I think he's right, though. I mean, unless you're going to get like the Marchesa or the Triskelion half, I think there's just not things I necessarily want to go for consistently enough to run that many tutors.
Yeah, especially because a few of these put the card on top of your library. So,
yeah,
a Mystical Tutor, unless you have a way to draw right away, which he really doesn't, you're just setting up your next turn.
And what are you getting with a Mystical Tutor that's sure, you can go get Rift, because that's always a great card to go get, and that's fine. And maybe Intuition to go get some combo pieces then, or you're going to, definitely the creature tutors will go get you combo pieces. But I just don't, I think then if you're playing with people that are playing weaker decks, there's going to be times when you're like, I don't want to go just get my win condition right now and end the game.
Right.
Because that's what the combo's going to do. If you just go grab half a Mike and Trike, the game's just over.
Yep.
So I would maybe scale those back a little bit. I think Diabolic Intent, number 1, this deck doesn't have that many creatures. I mean, yes, you're playing Marchesa, so there's times when you can use that as a way to sacrifice your, Baleful Strix or something and have it come back into play because of the counter and draw the card and what have you. But it's also like if you draw that on turn 3 or turn 4, you might not be in a position to use it until turn 8. And that, I think, always kind of feels bad.
Yeah. If you don't, like, I run Diabolical Intent in my Regna and Krav deck because I'm making tokens. So
you always have something to sacrifice.
Yes. Where in this deck, if the only thing you have out is, a Notion Thief, you don't want to sacrifice Notion Thief because you're getting more value off of the extra draws you're probably stealing from your opponents.
Yeah, I agree. I that would be the first one I would cut. And I just don't know if Mystical Tutor is worth the slot either, just because I don't know what you're going to get besides Rift. Maybe if you do switch to start running things like Mob Rule or Insurrection, then maybe then you want to leave that in there to go get those optionally as well once, somebody drops a ton of Angels or what have you.
Yeah.
They play one of those Miracles and play, 15 Angels, or they play a, Army of the Damned and play, 13 Zombies, whatever.
Yeah.
There's only a couple counter spells in there. We're looking at Swan Song and Arcane Denial, and I think I saw one more, Disallow.
There's a Disallow in here, yep. That's not a lot, and that is legitimately the only protection in the deck for anything, whether it's his own spells or Marchesa.
Disallow, I wonder if it's not there for the Stifle, and so you can hit someone trying to Bajuka Bug your graveyard or something.
Yep, and you know what? That's probably fine.
Yeah.
Because Stifle isn't going to counter a spell. So
and also, you don't need it just because you're running blue doesn't mean you need to have 12 counter spells. I think 3 is a perfectly reasonable amount to run.
Right. I think in this deck the counters are to protect the combo.
Yeah, I would guess. And I think that's probably a reasonable amount to run too. So I'm mostly on board with all of that.
Yep.
So there's a couple of board wipes in here too. In the spells, there's Damnation and Blasphemous Act, Toxic Deluge. I think those are the 3, right?
Yep.
And I like
Rift, I guess. Rift.
Yeah, and Rift. And again, that's roughly the amount I use running the deck. I'm usually looking at the 3 to 4-ish range, so that seems about on board with what I do.
Yeah. I found it odd that there's no Lightning Greaves or Swiftfoot Boots for just protecting Marchesa.
Particularly considering how much hate she generates.
Yes.
Which he mentioned, and he's not wrong. Like, when people see Marchesa, they assume you're going to be doing abusive stuff, which you almost always are. So that's fine. But yeah, I think she needs some protection. I would say Greaves at the very least.
Yep. A lot of this stuff doesn't target Marchesa, so Greaves is perfect. Putting in both, I don't see hurting as well. Yeah,
I don't think it would hurt you at all.
Especially because, you might not need all these tutors, so why not replace a couple of them for these two very cheap cards?
For sure. Good call. Yeah, pull the Diabolic Intent and put in your Lightning Greaves, and, if you pull one other one, pull Mystical Tutor, you could easily put in Swifties, and that's going to solve problems plenty of different times.
Yep. I really like Toothy in this deck.
Yes.
As a creature, and I'm sorry I'm going back to creatures, but...
No, that's fine.
But I think another one that could be really good in here is the one from M15, where it's you make all the squid tokens when it dies.
Oh, yeah. Man.
I can't remember.
Chasm Skulker?
Yes, there it is. Chasm Skulker is for 2 and a blue. Squid Horror. Whenever you draw a card, put a +1/+1 counter on it. Then when it dies, create X 1/1 blue squid tokens with Island Walk, where X is the number of counters on it. So it's similar to Toothy. You're going to be drawing cards. It gets bigger. But it'll just come back.
Sure.
And then you can keep doing it over and over, and you amass this amount of tokens that you can protect your board with or swing with.
Yeah, that's a good one.
And I'm just kind of assuming here, which is bad on me, I know, internet, but seeing that this is a very competitive deck, and he talked about that his meta is very competitive, I'm thinking there's a lot of blue in this meta, so these Island Walk squids will probably come in handy.
Yeah, yes. But even if they don't happen to have Island Walk, that's still really frequently pretty good.
Yes.
Well, in a similar vein as a creature, I think Puppeteer Click is really, really solid. It's kind of a mini Sepulchral Primordial. It's 3 and double black. And when it comes into play, you put target creature card from an opponent's graveyard onto the battlefield under your control. So it does your reanimation thing, But I think it really synergizes with Marchesa really well because it has persist. So it's the kind of thing where you can sack it to Ashes Ultra, have it come back into play, and get something else again. And then if you happen to be able to swing at somebody on the throne, then you can counter that -1 counter on Puppeteer Click with the +1 counter Marchesa puts on it, freeing you up to sacrifice it again.
Yep.
So it's the kind of, I mean, if you have a sack outlet out and someone else is on the throne, you can use that, 3 times in a single turn, and maybe every turn then repeatedly use it multiple times.
Yeah.
So I think those kind of effects that are going to completely change the face of the game, and they're going to change it in a way that allows you to win versus just changing it in a way that maybe doesn't allow you to win is the kind of thing you maybe want to do here a little bit.
Yep.
Because like Imperial Recruiter or Baleful Strix, like Baleful Strix is a great card, and I'm not saying you should pull that out, but blinking Baleful Strix every turn is just going to draw you a card. And it's not even every turn, it'll be maybe presumably every one of your turns. So like every trip around the board, it winds up being a Phyrexian Arena, basically. It's going to get you an extra card, and if no one interferes, that's fine. But that's not going to win you games, and I think Puppeteer Click, there are situations where Puppeteer Click wins you games.
Oh, for sure. I would like to know why Aura Thief is in the deck. I feel like that's a meta call.
And if I played in a meta where you saw an Enchantress deck regularly, being able to blink that thing, I keep saying blink, and being able to like kill it and have it come back and take every single enchantment is great.
Right.
So as a meta call, that completely makes sense. Outside that, man, I don't know if I would want to run it.
Neither do I, and that's where I would slot in, similar to your Puppeteer Click, Gwendolynda Archmage.
Yeah, which is, I will say this, playing against our friend's Marchesa deck, when he has Gwendolynda Archmage out, or Archmage, I guess, and he has the ability to sack it and bring it back and do stuff with it, that's almost impossible to fight through.
It definitely is.
And again, it's not a super cheap card, but I don't think this is a budget deck necessarily either. So that would be one I would really consider here as well. Versus, again, like, not that Runescarred Demon isn't an awesome card, and being able to tutor something repeatedly is really, really useful, but there's a ton of tutors in here already, and unless you have things to go get with that, I think it lends itself to maybe dirtling a little bit.
Yep, I totally agree. So as we've gone over this, we've talked about the Reanimator stuff is mainly a single target.
Yeah.
Between the Entombs and the Reanimates, and then there's something like Dance of the Dead and Necromancy, stuff like that. But with how much of this draw that either Tom is currently running or even that we have suggested, it's putting a lot of stuff into your graveyard at once. So yes. I mentioned this earlier in the show, but stuff like Living Death and Living End, similar to how Insurrection or Mob Rule are going to win the game,
yes,
those cards alone are going to win the game.
Yeah, and he also runs those, and our friend Wes, the Mob Rule Insurrection Marchesa deck, runs those in that deck as well, and they're also backbreaking.
Right. I mean, I'm not suggesting put in a Traumatize to get, half your library
for sure,
in the graveyard, but like, if you cast a Living End, half at turn 10, and everybody has 3 or 4 creature cards in their graveyard, plus whatever you have, you just totally shifted the tide of the game to where you're now the threat, and you're probably going to win.
Or even things like Rise of the Dark Realms.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's not a cheap card anymore, but those I don't think you'd want to run Rise and Insurrection, but I think this deck has room to run one of those 2 cards, both of which have the potential to just win the game.
Yep.
The one thing I think for a lot of the strategies we would suggest, or we have suggested in a lot of the cards, I do think the deck probably needs a couple more sack outlets that can just unquestionably sack things without limit. There is already an Ashes Ultra in here, but I think you'd probably want a Phyrexian Ultra as well.
Yeah, especially with how mana intensive this deck is for colors. Being able to sack to get a colored mana is really handy. I mean, I run both in my Regna and Krav deck just because it's redundancy at that point.
Yeah, I mean, I ran them both when I was playing Teysa Orzhov Scion, and I just never regretted it, because if someone killed one, you just play the second one, and people quickly realize they need to kill them anyway. So you need redundancy, and I think a lot of the stuff that we're talking does really rely on having sack outlets you can go back to. He does a Viscera Seer, which I think is a really good one. But I think a few of those kind of things would be useful here.
Mm-hmm.
Like, and I would replace Dak Faden probably with something like Phyrexian Altar. Dak's a good card, and I get why he's here. That +2 where you can draw 2 cards and discard 2 feeds the reanimation. But I think there's enough things you have that put cards in your graveyard already.
Yeah.
He's not, like, I don't think he's bad. I'm not saying that. I just don't know if that effect is something you need nearly as much as you could use one more no restriction sack outlet.
I think I'd rather put in a high market over cutting Dak Faden.
Well, that's the thing. I would also be very tempted to run high market and something else like Phyrexian Tower, just to have those as lands as well as additional, because those you're going to use once.
True. I guess I have this gut feeling that Dax -2, although probably not used a lot, being able to steal a Worm Coil engine.
Sure.
And then Marchesa it the next turn type of thing.
And then sack it and have it make the tokens and then come back into play anyway.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, I think Dak has just enough utility besides his +1 in this type of deck where I don't know if it would be my first cut, but I agree that cutting something, maybe not Dak, but yeah, I mean, 3 mana for 3 mana, it makes sense.
Yeah. Anything else that you want to say here?
I want to play this deck.
Yeah, I'm super curious because it's really, really powerful. I want to see if that's like in its current state, if that's really the case where I think the cogs don't quite mesh together the way he wants it to.
Yep.
Because it looks, just glancing over it, there's a lot of bomb cards in here.
Right. That is, I mean, I opened this deck list up this morning. I'm like, I don't know what to do to make this better, but I know how to make it more fun to play against is kind of how I took my notes tonight.
Yeah, and I think when you are playing a strong deck like this too, I don't think you want to toy with your food too much. I do think you want to have ways to put the game away. I think maybe that's where he struggles there. So I think hopefully some of these ideas can allow you to put the game away without changing too much what the deck's trying to do.
For sure.
All right. Tom, thank you very much for sharing this deck with us and letting us take a look at it.
Yes, it was awesome to see. Marchesa's, an interesting commander to build and to play against, so it's fun to expect, and it's kind of fun for me to look at other people's decks when we actually play against these commanders in our shop. Because
we've had a few where we've talked about, like, I've never seen this commander before, so I don't have a frame of reference. I have one for Marchesa. I have a pretty deep frame here, so like it's nice to see this and see the comparison. Or Thief being a great example. None of the Marchesa decks we've seen run Aura Thief, but I completely get in certain environments how that card is just disgusting.
Yes.
So, that's kind of fun to see. I'm not going to suggest that to anyone in our meta because I don't want to deal with it.
Please don't.
No, not at all. But like, I get that. So that's cool to see those kind of things here as well. That is going to wrap up episode 101. Thanks to our editor, Ken Peddle. You can find him on Twitter at LOAD3R. Our podcast theme is Retro Future Dirty by Kevin MacLeod, licensed via Creative Commons. You can find me on Twitter at Dana Roach. You can find Max on Twitter at CommanderCentral_Max and Chris at WiseSquishy1. We will be back next Monday with a regularly scheduled show. Until then, I am Dana.
And I'm Max.